The wind over the Montana highlands never whispered softly. It cut, carrying the bite of truth that no one wanted to speak aloud. That morning, it howled through the clearing like it knew what was about to happen, like it mourned for the girl standing barefoot in the frost. If you've ever wondered what it sounds like when a soul breaks, listen closely. Because this is how mine began to crack. Before we go deeper, if you're here for stories that don't flinch, for love that burns and scars and heals all at once, make sure you're subscribed. You won't want to miss what comes after this. The sky was still dark when they brought me to the trading ground. My wrists were bound with leather, not because I'd fought, but because appearances mattered in the packs. The daughter of a failed beta shouldn't look defiant, even when she's being sold. My father wouldn't look at me. My mother's lips trembled, but her eyes were dry. There were no tears left to shed. They'd traded those away long ago. Clara Monroe, the elder called out, his voice low and cracked like old wood. Offered to the Ironclaw Alpha for 1 silver chest and a year's protection. The crowd murmured. The words offered and sold meant the same thing, but offered sounded less cruel. And then he came. Alpha Lucas Kane. I'd heard stories about him since childhood. The man with the iron eyes, the beast who never smiled, the alpha who ruled his pack through silence instead of cruelty. They said he'd lost his mate years ago and hadn't shifted since. Some called it tragedy. Others called it curse. That morning, as he rode into the clearing, I saw neither. I saw command. Raw, quiet, heavy. The kind of power that didn't need to roar to be obeyed. He dismounted his horse, boots crunching against the frost. Every gaze turned to follow him. The pack bent their heads. Even my father's shoulders bowed, but I didn't. Maybe I should have. Maybe pride was a mistake. But pride was all I had left. Lucas's eyes found mine across the space between us. Steel gray. Unreadable. He looked me over once, not like a man admiring a woman, but like a wolf assessing a wound. She's barren, my father blurted, the words rushing out too fast. The healer confirmed it. We wouldn't deceive the alpha. Lucas didn't answer. He didn't even blink. He just stepped closer until I could see the faint scar along his jaw, the shadow of exhaustion beneath his eyes. He studied me a moment longer, then spoke, voice deep and measured. Barren maybe, but strong enough to meet my gaze when every man here won't. The elder shifted uncomfortably. Alpha Kane, shall we proceed? Lucas nodded once. The deal was struck. The silver chest exchanged hands, and just like that I was property. No goodbye. No promise. Just the hollow silence of a world that had already decided my worth. They placed me behind him on his horse, and as we rode away, the cold burned my skin raw. I didn't cry. I'd done enough of that in secret. Instead, I watched the rising sun over the ridge, the color of blood and fire, and made myself a promise. If they wanted a weak woman, they'd regret buying me. The ride to the Ironclaw fortress took the better part of a day. Mountains rose around us like sentinels, forests whispering in a language older than the packs themselves. Wolves followed at a distance, silent, wary. When we reached the fortress gates, I expected to be led to servant quarters or locked away. Instead, Lucas led me straight to the ceremonial circle. The pack gathered fast, hundreds of eyes watching, whispering. Their new Luna had arrived, barren and unwanted. The elder of his pack stepped forward, voice trembling. Alpha, we've yet to test her loyalty. Lucas didn't let him finish. His hand came up, silent command. He turned to me, his expression unreadable, but something in his gaze, it wasn't cruelty. It was decision. Final. He stepped closer, so close that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. His scent hit me, pine, storm, something untamed. My pulse raced against my will. You know what this means, he said quietly, his voice low enough that only I could hear. I know I didn't agree to it, I shot back. The corner of his mouth almost twitched, a ghost of a smile that never fully formed. You don't have to. Then he leaned in, his hand gripping the side of my neck, thumb pressing against the hollow of my throat. The crowd hushed, breath held. And before I could speak, before I could understand, his fangs brushed my skin. The mark seared into me, heat, light, power. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't cruel. It was claim. A collective gasp rippled through the pack. The elders stammered. Alpha, you can't, she's not. I can, Lucas said, straightening, his voice like thunder held in restraint. She's mine. Silence fell heavy. No one moved. No one dared. He looked at me then, really looked. From this moment on, no one speaks of her as Barren again. His words rolled through the clearing like a command from the moon itself. I stood frozen, my neck burning, my heart caught between rage and something I couldn't name. The mark pulsed in time with his heartbeat. I hated the feeling, how it made me aware of him, of the power he just bound to mine. He turned and started toward the fortress, leaving me standing before the stunned crowd. The wolves bowed to him as he passed. And then, one by one, they bowed to me too. The humiliation I'd carried all morning twisted into something darker. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh. I'd been bought like property, but now I was their Luna. No one knew that the real price hadn't been silver. It was going to be blood. And as the cold wind bit through the silence, I finally understood why the stories always said the Alpha of Ironclaw had no mate. Because whatever he claimed, he never intended to let go. When I followed him inside, the mark still burned, a promise and a warning. And deep down, in the place where my wolf used to sleep, something ancient stirred. Something that wasn't barren at all. The Ironclaw fortress was carved into the mountain itself, not built to keep people out, but to keep something far more dangerous in. Cold stone walls glowed faintly under the light of the torches, the corridors wide enough for wolves to run through in their full form. The air always carried the same weight, iron, pine, and the faint echo of dominance that never quite left your lungs once you breathed it in. I had thought being claimed would mean chains, orders, punishment, but what I found was stranger than anything I'd imagined. Lucas Kane didn't speak to me for the first 2 days. He didn't summon me, didn't demand my presence, didn't touch the mark he'd burned into my neck. He just existed like the mountain itself, distant, immovable, watching everything and saying nothing. The pack moved around him like he was both king and curse. Warriors lowered their gazes when he passed. The women whispered that he hadn't shifted since the death of his mate, that when the moon had taken her, she'd taken part of him with her. Some said that was why he bought me. That Barren meant safe. That no child would ever carry the curse that haunted him. Maybe they were right. Maybe that was all I was. A scar that couldn't reproduce itself. But then there were moments when I'd catch him looking at me, not with desire, but with something sharper, as though he was trying to remember a dream he couldn't shake. The third night after my arrival, I found the courage to wander beyond my assigned chambers. The moon was high, spilling cold light across the mountain pass. I followed the faint sound of a low growl, not threatening, more like pain. The stables were empty except for one creature. A wolf, massive and wounded, its fur matted with blood. One of its legs was twisted unnaturally, and there were strange symbols burned into its flank, curling, ancient markings that pulsed faintly with silver light. I should have called for help. I should have run. But the healer's daughter in me moved first. I knelt beside it, whispering softly. Easy. I'm not going to hurt you. The wolf's eyes flickered open, gray, familiar. Too familiar. My hands froze mid-motion. The color. I'd only ever seen eyes like that on one man. The wolf let out a low rumble, almost human in its restraint. I pressed a cloth to the wound, feeling its heartbeat through the trembling fur. "You're not supposed to be here," I murmured. "But then again, neither am I." I worked in silence for hours, cleaning and binding the wounds as best I could. When I was done, I stepped back, blood staining my hands, my heart pounding too hard. The wolf watched me, unblinking. And then it did something impossible. It bowed its head. A shiver rolled through me, the mark on my neck tingling, warm against my skin. "What are you?" I whispered. The wolf's gaze didn't waver, but there was no answer, only the sound of the wind howling through the cracks of the stone. When I turned to leave, I felt eyes on me. From the shadows near the stable's entrance, a tall figure stood half-shrouded in darkness. Lucas. His expression was unreadable, but his jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "I was helping," I replied, defiant, though my pulse jumped. "I didn't ask for help." "No," I said, meeting his gaze, "but your wolf did." He went still. The space between us tightened, air heavy enough to bend sound. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. When I looked back at the wolf, it was gone. That night I barely slept. The fortress hummed with whispers. I could feel them in the walls, in the wind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the glowing symbols, the eyes that matched his. By morning, the stables were empty, no sign of blood, no sign of tracks. As if it had never happened. But Lucas was different. He avoided me less. Watched me more. His questions came out of nowhere, about the healers, about my family, about what I saw in dreams. I never told him everything, but somehow, he always seemed to know the pieces I left unsaid. One evening, as the sun bled out over the ridges, I found him in the training yard, shirt discarded, scars across his chest glinting with sweat. I should have walked away. I didn't. "What do you want from me?" I asked. He looked up, breath heavy, eyes shadowed. "Nothing you're not already giving." "And what's that supposed to mean?" He didn't answer. He never did. Days passed. The bond between us grew stranger, subtler. Sometimes when he was gone, I'd feel his emotions brush against mine, brief flashes of anger, fear, loneliness. I thought I was imagining it until one afternoon, I pricked my hand on a blade and heard his voice in my head, sharp, startled. "Clara." It faded instantly, but the echo stayed. That night, a storm rolled in. I couldn't sleep. The thunder shook the mountain, the rain hammering against the windows like fists. I wandered through the dark corridors, following the scent of smoke and cedar, his scent. His door was ajar. Inside, the fire burned low, shadows dancing along the walls. He was lying on his back, arm across his chest, face turned toward the flames. For the first time, he didn't look like an Alpha King. He looked human. His lips moved faintly, voice rough with sleep. I took a step closer, breath held. He whispered a name. My name. My heart stopped. He said it again, softer this time, almost like a plea. I stood frozen, staring at him, at the man who'd bought me, marked me, and built walls so high even the moonlight couldn't climb them. But in that moment, those walls cracked. And I realized that whatever haunted Lucas Kane wasn't the ghost of a dead mate. It was the echo of something that had never truly died. Outside, lightning split the sky, casting him in silver light. His mark on my neck pulsed once, hard, and I felt the strangest thing. A heartbeat that wasn't mine answering from somewhere deep inside his chest. When the thunder faded, so did his voice. He turned in his sleep, unaware of what he'd said, unaware that I'd heard it. But I knew. And for the first time since the day I'd been sold, I didn't know whether to fear him or fate itself. The moon that night hung lower than usual, swollen, pale, and watchful. Its light spilled across the Ironclaw fortress like liquid silver, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I couldn't stop staring at it. It called to me, whispered to something ancient beneath my skin, something that shouldn't exist. The air inside my chambers was still, too still. The fire had burned out hours ago, yet the room felt fever-hot. My pulse thudded in my ears, the mark on my neck pulsing in rhythm with the rising moon. Then it began. At first, it was just a shimmer at the edge of sight, a faint flicker, like heat distortion. But then I saw them. Flashes, brief and blinding. A forest drenched in moonlight. A silver wolf standing at the center of a burning field. A man's hand, Lucas's hand, reaching for me through the smoke. And behind it all, a voice. A woman's voice, low and haunting, whispering my name as though she'd known it before I was ever born. Clara. I gasped and stumbled back, clutching the wall. My skin prickled as if my blood had caught fire. My reflection in the window shimmered. My eyes, once hazel, now glowed bright silver. Not white. Not gray. Silver. That wasn't possible. No wolf had eyes like that. Not unless. The door burst open. Lucas stood there, half-dressed, his hair tousled, his chest heaving. He must have felt it, the surge of energy that had rippled through the fortress like a storm. What did you do? His voice was low, sharp, threaded with something that sounded almost like fear. Nothing, I stammered, though my hands still burned with light. I don't know what's happening to me. He stepped closer, cautious. The weight of his presence filled the room, that alpha dominance pressing against the wild energy that had risen in me. Your eyes, he said softly. They're not. I know. My voice broke. I can't stop it. The light flared again. Lucas reached for me, but the moment his fingers brushed my wrist, a pulse of power erupted between us, invisible, electric, violent. He was thrown backward, hitting the wall with enough force to crack stone. Lucas! I cried out, rushing to him, but he was already on his knees, his body trembling, his eyes wide with shock. The mark between us burned, both of ours, twin brands of light and pain. What are you? He whispered. I didn't have an answer. The energy faded as quickly as it had come, leaving me hollow, shaking. The silence that followed was thick and charged, broken only by the pounding of our hearts. Lucas pushed himself up, wincing. No mortal wolf has that kind of power, he muttered, half to himself. And no barren woman should carry a mark that burns like that. I wanted to speak, to deny it, to tell him I was still me. But the truth was burning too close to the surface. I didn't even feel human anymore. He stepped toward me again, slower this time, his gaze searching mine. You've felt this before, haven't you? Only in my dreams, I whispered. But they don't feel like dreams. They feel like memories. Of what? I hesitated. Of someone who wasn't me. A woman standing under the moon, surrounded by wolves that bowed to her. Lucas froze. The look in his eyes shifted. Fear, yes, but also recognition. Before he could speak, the door creaked again. Elder Rowan stepped into the room, his cane striking the floor like a heartbeat. His gray eyes flickered to me, then to Lucas, then back. So it's begun, he murmured, almost to himself. Lucas straightened, his tone sharp. You knew something like this could happen? Rowan didn't answer right away. He studied me as though he were reading an old script etched into my skin. Then he said quietly, She carries the blood of the Lunari. I frowned. The what? Lucas's eyes narrowed. That's a myth. The elder's lips pressed into a thin line. A myth, he said, that once saved this world. He limped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. The Lunari were not ordinary wolves. They were born of the moon itself, she-wolves who carried both light and shadow within them. Their purpose was to resurrect broken alphas, to heal what death and madness had taken. But their power came with a cost. My heart hammered. What kind of cost? Rowan's voice softened, but his words were heavy as iron. Every time a Lunari's power awakens, it takes from her what it gives to others. Her life, her soul, piece by piece. The stronger she becomes, the faster she burns away. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. You're saying that if this, whatever it is, keeps happening, it'll kill me. The elder nodded once. If it awakens fully, the moon's gift is never free. Lucas moved between us, his voice low and dangerous. Why would the gods tie a death curse to her bloodline? Because resurrection was never meant for mortals, Rowan replied. The Lunari were created when alphas lost their balance, when love turned to ruin. They were meant to restore the natural order, even if it meant dying to do so. He turned to me again. You said you see visions of another life. That's the first sign. Your power is remembering what it once was. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. And what if I don't want it? The elder's expression softened, pity flickering in his eyes. You don't have a choice, child. The moon chooses its vessel. He turned to leave, but before he did, he glanced at Lucas. Protect her. Because when the next full moon rises, every creature who still worships the old ways will feel her awakening. And they will come for her. The door closed, leaving the silence humming between us again. I stared at the fire, unable to breathe. The words Lunari and death tangled in my mind like thorns. Lucas broke the silence first, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. You're not Barren, he said. I looked up, startled. He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. You were never barren, Clara. You were bound. Something in his tone, reverent, regretful, made my chest tighten. The light from the fire caught on the mark at his throat, and for the briefest second, it glowed faintly in sync with mine. I don't know what this means, I whispered, or what I am anymore. His hand hovered near my face, not quite touching. You're mine, he said softly, and I'll make sure you survive whatever the moon tries to take from you. Outside, the wind howled through the canyons, low, mournful, ancient. And beneath my skin, something held back. It wasn't pain. It wasn't fear. It was the wolf I never knew I had. And it was waking up. The fortress didn't sleep anymore. Ever since the night my eyes first turned silver, the walls seemed alive. Every breath of wind carried whispers, every flame in the torches flickered with something that felt like recognition. It was as though the mountain itself knew my secret before I did. But nothing haunted me more than Lucas's silence. Days passed, and he spoke little. He trained alone in the courtyard, the clang of steel echoing like thunder. He was avoiding me, I could tell. Every time I entered a room, he found a reason to leave it. But when our eyes did meet, the air changed. Something unseen always stirred, like gravity itself tilted toward him. And the bond. God, the bond wouldn't stop pulsing. It was getting stronger. I felt it even when he wasn't near. His heartbeat under my skin, his hunger threaded through mine. Every time he suppressed it, the connection fought back, sharper, more demanding. It wanted us close. It wanted more. I didn't understand it at first. The way my power spiked whenever I thought of him. The way the mark on my neck throbbed when his voice roughened. The Lunari blood didn't just respond to emotion, it fed on it. And Lucas Kane was starving it with his restraint. That night, I couldn't sleep. The moon was full, its glow spilling through the narrow window of my room, bathing everything in white fire. I could feel it thrumming in my bones, whispering, "Come." So I went. The corridor was silent as I followed the light down to the open terrace overlooking the valley. And there he was, shirtless, standing at the edge, the wind clawing at his hair, his scars glowing faintly in the moonlight. He didn't turn when he spoke. You shouldn't be here. My voice was quieter than I meant it to be. You say that every time you're about to let me stay. He exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. You shouldn't test me tonight. Why not? His head tilted slightly, the muscle in his cheek twitching. Because I'm losing. I stepped closer, heart hammering. Losing what? Control. The words snapped between us like lightning. The bond flared, hot and electric. My mark burned against my skin. His responded instantly, glowing faint red through the darkness. The air shimmered, our energy colliding, twisting, hungry. I should have turned away. I should have been afraid. But all I felt was a pull. That same strange gravity that refused to let go. You think I want this? He said, his voice low, ragged. You think I want to feel you in my head, in my blood, every time the moon rises? Then stop fighting it, I whispered. He turned then, eyes blazing gold. You don't know what you're asking for, Clara. Then show me. The space between us vanished. He crossed the terrace in one breath, one heartbeat. His hand caught the back of my neck, pulling me in, his lips crashing against mine with a desperation that bordered on pain. The world seemed to ignite. The moonlight pulsed brighter, pouring down like liquid flame. My power surged up, flooding through us both. Sparks crawled across our skin where we touched, the bond twisting tighter, deeper. Lucas broke the kiss first, breath ragged, his forehead resting against mine. You're dangerous, he whispered. So are you, I said. And then the howling began. Not from me. Not from him. From below. Hundreds of wolves across the valley, their voices rising as one, bending, breaking, submitting. The power rolling from us wasn't just light anymore. It was command. Instinct. An ancient signal that reached into the marrow of every wolf in Ironclaw. The moon shimmered blood red for a heartbeat. Lucas stared at me, realization dawning, horror flickering behind the gold of his eyes. The prophecy, he breathed. I frowned, dazed. What prophecy? He didn't answer, because the ground began to shake. The stones beneath our feet groaned. A deep tremor ripped through the mountain, sending cracks along the terrace wall. The torches inside the fortress flared and died, snuffed out by an unseen wind. And then pain. Sharp, burning, his mark. I cried out as it seared black against his throat, the light snuffed out, replaced by something dark and alive. His knees buckled. I reached for him, but he pushed me back, eyes wild, veins standing out against his skin. Claire, get back, he growled, his voice deeper, rougher, almost other. But I couldn't move. The darkness spreading from his mark wasn't just shadow, it was corruption. I could feel it crawling through him, poisoning the bond, twisting the connection that tied us. Lucas. His body convulsed. For a moment, I thought he might shift, but his wolf wasn't coming through. It was something else. Something older. And then, through the chaos, the wind spoke. A voice. Feminine. Cold as ice and twice as cruel. The Lunari must not awaken. It came from everywhere and nowhere, through the stones, through the air, through the mark itself. The words wrapped around my heart, squeezing. I dropped to my knees beside him, my fingers trembling as I tried to touch his face. Lucas, look at me. His eyes flickered open, and for a heartbeat, I didn't see him at all. I saw a wolf made of shadow and flame, something caged beneath centuries of silence. Then the vision vanished. He gasped, the black lines receding slightly, leaving his skin ashen. What was that? I whispered. He shook his head slowly, struggling to breathe. Not prophecy, he rasped. Warning. My heart thundered. From who? His gaze met mine, haunted, broken. From whatever cursed me long before I ever found you. the mountain trembled again, but softer this time, fading into silence. The world held its breath. Lucas's head fell forward against my shoulder, his voice barely audible. The Lunari's awakening wasn't meant to happen yet. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the tremors still running through his body. Then why now? His answer was a whisper, a confession against my skin. Because I wanted you too much. Outside, the moon dimmed. The wolves' howls fell silent. The air tasted of iron and ash. And in the quiet that followed, I realized something that chilled me to my core. The bond between us wasn't just passion. It wasn't even love. It was a curse waking up, and it had only just begun to hunger. The days after the tremor felt like the mountain itself had stopped breathing. The air hung heavy, thick with silence. Even the wolves of Ironclaw moved differently now, shoulders low, ears back, uneasy. Something was breaking, and it wasn't just the fortress. It was him. Lucas Kane, Alpha of Ironclaw, the man who could bring an entire pack to its knees with one command, was dying. It began slowly. A stiffness in his movements. A flash of pain in his eyes that he tried to hide. But within a week, the truth became undeniable. His power was fading. His wolf, his very essence, was tearing him apart from the inside. The mark on his neck, once bright and burning, had turned black as coal. Each day, the shadow spread a little farther, veins of darkness crawling up his throat like roots seeking the sun. The healers tried everything, herbs, chants, old remedies whispered through generations, but nothing worked. Every attempt only seemed to make the mark pulse darker, stronger, as if mocking their efforts. I stayed by his side through it all. I couldn't leave him. Not when every breath he took sounded like it cost him a piece of his soul. Sometimes, in the dark of night, when the fortress was quiet and the only sound was the faint crackle of the fire, he'd reach for my hand. His touch was weak now, his skin fever-hot. "You shouldn't be here," he'd rasp, his voice barely a whisper. I'd smile softly even when it hurt. "You've said that since the day we met. Has it ever worked?" He'd try to laugh, but the sound always ended in a cough, low and raw. And still, even in that state, his eyes, those gray, storm-filled eyes, never lost their strength. There was something inside him that refused to bow, even as his body betrayed him. But I could feel it. His wolf wasn't sleeping. It was trapped, clawing, raging beneath the surface. The connection between us pulsed with its fury, a desperate, aching rhythm. He was being devoured from within. The corridor was silent as I followed the light down to the open terrace overlooking the valley. And there he was, shirtless, standing at the edge, the wind clawing at his hair, his scars glowing faintly in the moonlight. He didn't turn when he spoke. "You shouldn't be here." My voice was quieter than I meant it to be. "You say that every time you're about to let me stay." He exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. "You shouldn't test me tonight." "Why not?" His head tilted slightly, the muscle in his cheek twitching. "Because I'm losing." I stepped closer, heart hammering. "Losing what?" "Control." The words snapped between us like lightning. The bond flared, hot and electric. My mark burned against my skin. His responded instantly, glowing faint red through the darkness. The air shimmered, our energy colliding, twisting, hungry. I should have turned away. I should have been afraid. But all I felt was a pull. That same strange gravity that refused to let go. "You think I want this?" he said, his voice low, ragged. "You think I want to feel you in my head, in my blood, every time the moon rises? Then stop fighting it," I whispered. He turned then, eyes blazing gold. "You don't know what you're asking for, Clara." "Then show me." The space between us vanished. He crossed the terrace in one breath, one heartbeat. His hand caught the back of my neck, pulling me in, his lips crashing against mine with a desperation that bordered on pain. The world seemed to ignite. The moonlight pulsed brighter, pouring down like liquid flame. My powers surged up, flooding through us both. Sparks crawled across our skin where we touched, the bond twisting tighter, deeper. Lucas broke the kiss first, breath ragged, his forehead resting against mine. "You're dangerous," he whispered. "So are you," I said. And then the howling began. Not from me. Not from him. From below. Hundreds of wolves across the valley, their voices rising as one, bending, breaking, submitting. The power rolling from us wasn't just light anymore. It was command. Instinct. An ancient signal that reached into the marrow of every wolf in Ironclaw. The moon shimmered blood red for a heartbeat. Lucas stared at me, realization dawning, horror flickering behind the gold of his eyes. "The prophecy," he breathed. I frowned, dazed. "What prophecy?" He didn't answer, because the ground began to shake. The stones beneath our feet groaned. A deep tremor ripped through the mountain, sending cracks along the terrace wall. The torches inside the fortress flared and died, snuffed out by an unseen wind. And then pain. Sharp, burning, his mark. I cried out as it seared black against his throat, the light snuffed out, replaced by something dark and alive. His knees buckled. I reached for him, but he pushed me back, eyes wild, veins standing out against his skin. "Clara, get back," he growled, his voice deeper, rougher, almost other. But I couldn't move. The darkness spreading from his mark wasn't just shadow, it was corruption. I could feel it crawling through him, poisoning the bond, twisting the connection that tied us. "Lucas!" His body convulsed. For a moment, I thought he might shift, but his wolf wasn't coming through. It was something else. Something older. And then, through the chaos, the wind spoke. A voice. Feminine. Cold as ice and twice as cruel. The Lunari must not awaken. It came from everywhere and nowhere, through the stones, through the air, through the mark itself. The words wrapped around my heart, squeezing. I dropped to my knees beside him, my fingers trembling as I tried to touch his face. "Lucas, look at me." His eyes flickered open, and for a heartbeat, I didn't see him at all. I saw a wolf made of shadow and flame, something caged beneath centuries of silence. Then the vision vanished. He gasped, the black lines receding slightly, leaving his skin ashen. "What was that?" I whispered. He shook his head slowly, struggling to breathe. "Not prophecy," he rasped. "Warning." My heart thundered. "From who?" His gaze met mine, haunted, broken. "From whatever cursed me long before I ever found you." The mountain trembled again, but softer this time, fading into silence. The world held its breath. Lucas's head fell forward against my shoulder, his voice barely audible. The Lunari's awakening wasn't meant to happen yet. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the tremors still running through his body. "Then why now?" His answer was a whisper, a confession against my skin. "Because I wanted you too much." Outside, the moon dimmed. The wolves' howls fell silent. The air tasted of iron and ash. And in the quiet that followed, I realized something that chilled me to my core. The bond between us wasn't just passion. It wasn't even love. It was a curse waking up, and it had only just begun to hunger. The days after the tremor felt like the mountain itself had stopped breathing. The air hung heavy, thick with silence. Even the wolves of Ironclaw moved differently now, shoulders low, ears back, uneasy. Something was breaking, and it wasn't just the fortress. It was him. Lucas Kane, Alpha of Ironclaw, the man who could bring an entire pack to its knees with one command, was dying. It began slowly. A stiffness in his movements. A flash of pain in his eyes that he tried to hide. But within a week, the truth became undeniable. His power was fading. His wolf, his very essence, was tearing him apart from the inside. The mark on his neck, once bright and burning, had turned black as coal. Each day, the shadow spread a little farther, veins of darkness crawling up his throat like roots seeking the sun. The healers tried everything, herbs, chants, old remedies whispered through generations, but nothing worked. Every attempt only seemed to make the mark pulse darker, stronger, as if mocking their efforts. I stayed by his side through it all. I couldn't leave him. Not when every breath he took sounded like it cost him a piece of his soul. Sometimes, in the dark of night, when the fortress was quiet and the only sound was the faint crackle of the fire, he'd reach for my hand. His touch was weak now, his skin fever-hot. "You shouldn't be here," he'd rasp, his voice barely a whisper. I'd smile softly even when it hurt. "You've said that since the day we met. Has it ever worked?" He'd try to laugh, but the sound always ended in a cough, low and raw. And still, even in that state, his eyes, those gray, storm-filled eyes, never lost their strength. There was something inside him that refused to bow, even as his body betrayed him. But I could feel it. His wolf wasn't sleeping. It was trapped, clawing, raging beneath the surface. The connection between us pulsed with its fury, a desperate, aching rhythm. He was being devoured from within. He moved differently now, slower, more deliberate, as if listening to voices I couldn't hear. His presence filled every space like a weight pressing down on the air. The other wolves began to bow faster, speak softer, avoid his gaze. Even the elders stopped questioning him. The Ironclaw Pack had always feared their alpha. Now, they worshipped him, and I wasn't sure which was worse. One morning, I found him outside at dawn, shirtless in the cold, his body slick with sweat. He was sparring with two of his lieutenants. They were both seasoned warriors, built like stone, but he threw them aside as if they were children. "Enough!" I called out, stepping forward. He turned toward me, chest rising, eyes wild and gleaming. For a second I saw it again, that flash of crimson. But then he blinked, and the storm passed, leaving only Lucas. "Training," he said quietly, wiping the blood from his knuckles. "You're not training," I whispered. "You're testing yourself." He paused. "Maybe I am." "Against what?" He looked past me toward the mountains, where the mist rolled thick and slow. "Something I can't see yet." Later, in the great hall, the elders whispered. The wolves spoke of his strength returning tenfold, of new energy in the alpha bond that made even distant packs tremble. But they didn't see what I did. At night, when I lay beside him, his breathing wasn't human. It came in low, rumbling growls, the sound of something vast and ancient trying to breathe through him. Sometimes he would wake in a cold sweat, eyes open but unfocused. Once, I heard him whisper something, a name that wasn't mine. The next morning, I searched the archives. Elder Rowan watched me quietly as I dug through parchment after parchment, the scent of dust and age thick in the air. At last, I found it, a record of the Shadow Alphas. Wolves who had betrayed the moon thousands of years ago, trading their light for immortality. Their souls had been bound in the Underveil, a realm of shadow between life and death. The name written in the old script made my blood run cold. Kale, the Devourer, the first of the Shadow Alphas, the one who had tried to consume the moon herself. I didn't need to read further. I already knew where he was. That night, I confronted Lucas. He stood on the balcony overlooking the valley, the wind whipping through his dark hair. The moon hung low and red, a warning written across the sky. "You remember things that aren't yours," I said quietly. "You dream of places you've never been. You're stronger, faster, but your wolf doesn't feel like yours anymore." "Lucas, something came through with us," He didn't move for a long time. Then finally he said, "I know." My heart sank. "You know? How long?" "Since the first night," he said, turning to face me. "I thought it was a remnant of the darkness. A scar. But it's growing." He stepped closer, his voice low, haunted. "Sometimes I can hear him. A voice, deep, old. He tells me things no one should know. He shows me what power feels like when there are no rules left." "Lucas." "He's not wrong, Clara," he said sharply, eyes flashing again. "We've spent centuries bending to the will of the moon, to her prophecies, her chosen bloodlines. What if the shadow alphas were right to break free?" I felt my stomach twist. "That's not you talking, isn't it?" His tone softened, almost sorrowful. "You of all people should understand what it feels like to be told you're something you're not. To be used for what you carry." "I was never meant to free him," I said. "I was meant to heal you." He reached up, cupping my face with trembling fingers. For a moment he was Lucas again. My Lucas. The man I'd risked everything for. "Then why does it feel like he is the one healing me?" he whispered. The air between us shifted, heavy and cold. His grip tightened, not cruel but desperate. His breath came faster, his eyes flickering red and gray, like a war beneath his skin. Then his voice changed. Deeper. Sharper. Cruel. "She was never meant to live." I froze. That wasn't Lucas. That was him. The shadow. "Lucas," I whispered. "Fight it. Please." His hand dropped from my cheek to my throat, trembling. His eyes blazed crimson. "She defied the moon. She opened the gate. She broke the balance." He lifted me easily, his strength unnatural. The wind screamed around us. The pack below howled, their bodies trembling under the force of the red moon. "Lucas!" I cried. "It's me, Clara." For a heartbeat, his eyes flickered gray again. Confusion, pain, recognition. Then the shadow's voice hissed through him, "You are his weakness." And with a roar that split the night, Lucas, my mate, my alpha, threw me from the balcony. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was the crimson glow consuming him entirely, his shadow stretching across the mountain like a living thing. And in that endless fall, as the wind tore past me and the moon turned blood-red above, I understood the truth. The man I'd saved was gone, and the shadow had finally claimed his throne. The fall should have killed me. The wind howled past my ears, the cliffs flashing like silver knives beneath the red moon. I remember the taste of blood in my mouth, the sickening weight of betrayal, and the faint echo of Lucas's roar fading into the distance as I plunged into darkness. But death, it seemed, had no claim on me. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in a shallow river, the icy current whispering over my skin. My body ached, my breath ragged, yet somehow, impossibly, I was alive. The forest stretched around me, vast and ancient, the air thick with fog and moonlight. I tried to stand but collapsed to my knees, every nerve screaming. My reflection in the water stared back, hollow eyes, pale skin, and that mark at my collarbone glowing faintly silver. The bond between us was still there, but twisted, poisoned by the shadow. I could feel it pulling at me as though some part of my soul was still trapped in him, suffocating under the darkness I had helped unleash. I screamed, not in fear, but rage. The sound tore through the valley, echoing off the mountains until it didn't sound human anymore. Then the forest answered. The trees shuddered, their leaves shimmering with strange light. The water around me began to glow, threads of pale silver coiling like veins beneath the surface. The air grew colder, sharper, and from the fog rose a single voice, soft, ancient, and female. "Child of the moon, why do you cry for what was never yours to control?" I spun around. The mist thickened, shaping itself into a figure, tall, graceful, her hair like strands of light, her eyes pools of liquid white. She was neither wolf nor woman but something in between. "Who are you?" I whispered, though my voice trembled. "We are what remains of the Lunari," the spirit said. "The ones who bore the burden of creation before you were born. You carry what we sealed long ago, the Barren gift." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "Barren? You mean the curse?" "Not a curse," she interrupted gently. "A protection. You were never barren, Clara Monroe. Your body was sealed, your womb closed, your power hidden, because the moon feared what you might become if awakened too soon." Her words struck like thunder. I thought of every insult, every look of pity, every moment of being told I was less. Sold for the emptiness I carried. Branded unworthy of love, of life, of legacy. All this time, it hadn't been weakness. It had been containment. I sank back against the riverbank, the cold biting into my skin. "If that's true," I said hoarsely, "then why now? Why me?" The spirit knelt beside me, her hand hovering inches from my cheek. "Because the balance has broken. The shadow walks the living world again. The moon chose silence, but fate chose you." "I can't fight him," I whispered. "He's stronger now, different. It's not Lucas anymore." The spirit's expression softened. But he still feels you. Through the bond. Through the light he cannot kill." I looked down at my mark, the faint silver glow pulsing beneath my skin. To beat in time with my heart, weak, but alive. "You were made to restore what is lost," she said. "To heal what darkness devours. But you cannot do it sealed." I swallowed hard. "Then how do I break it?" Her eyes burned brighter. "Through pain. Through choice. Through death reborn." Before I could speak, her hand pressed against my chest. The touch was freezing, burning all at once. Light erupted through my body, a raw, searing force that tore through every nerve, every vein, every ounce of the person I had been. I screamed again, but this time, it wasn't a sound of fear. It was release. The light burst outward, racing through the forest like wildfire. The trees glowed, their roots splitting the earth. Flowers bloomed where my tears fell, shimmering with silver fire. The very air trembled as something inside me broke, the seal shattering like glass. And then I felt it. Power. Ancient, boundless, alive. It rushed through me like 1,000 rivers, every heartbeat a thunderclap. My body lifted from the ground, my hair floating in the air as the glow consumed me entirely. I was no longer just flesh. No longer the girl who had been sold, pitted, forgotten. I was the storm the moon had tried to bury. The Lunari reborn. When I finally collapsed, gasping, the spirit was gone, but the forest was awake. Wolves emerged from the trees, not flesh and blood, but light and smoke, their eyes like burning stars. They circled me silently, bowing their luminous heads in reverence. One stepped forward, nuzzling my hand. The moment its touch met my skin, I saw visions. The fortress in ruin, the pack divided, and Lucas standing beneath the blood moon, his body moving with unnatural grace, his eyes glowing the deep red of the shadow. He was leading them, but not as himself. The shadow had taken full control. My heart clenched. "He's still in there," I whispered to the wolf of light. "I can feel him. I have to bring him back." The creature's tail swayed once, slow and solemn. Then the others raised their heads and howled, a sound pure and clear, cutting through the night like a blade of silver. The moon responded, its light breaking through the clouds and washing over me. The bond flared in my chest, and for the first time in weeks, I felt him, Lucas, deep inside the storm. He was in pain. He was fighting. I rose to my feet, the light still pulsing beneath my skin, stronger now, steadier. My body felt renewed, alive in ways I'd never known possible. The wolves fell into step beside me, forming a silent, glowing guard. As I walked toward the mountain, I whispered into the wind, "You sold me for being barren." But what they didn't know is that the barren woman was never empty. The forest bent around me, the trees parting like subjects before a queen. By the time I reached the valley's edge, I could see the fortress again, burning, its towers lit by the crimson moon. The pack was at war. Wolves clashed beneath the bloodlight, their snarls echoing through the cliffs. And at the center of it all stood Lucas, or what was left of him. The shadow had fully claimed him. His skin gleamed with dark energy, his movements too smooth, too cruel. Every wolf that dared to rise against him was thrown aside with a flick of his hand. "Kill her," he commanded, his voice layered, two voices, one human, one demonic. The false Luna dies with the old world. But before the pack could move, the sky cracked open. A beam of silver light poured down, piercing through the red haze. The earth shuddered as I stepped forward, the wolves of light flanking me, their eyes burning like twin suns. Gasps rippled through the battlefield. Lucas turned, his crimson gaze locking on mine. For a heartbeat, his expression faltered, confusion flickering through the fury. "Clara!" I smiled faintly, my voice carrying through the wind. "You thought I died. But the moon doesn't bury her chosen. She waits until they rise." The shadow snarled through him, the ground trembling as his power surged. "You cannot reclaim what was never yours." I took another step, the white glow in my eyes igniting brighter than the moon itself. "Then you don't know what it means to love something enough to burn for it." The wind howled. The pack watched in stunned silence. And as the red and silver lights collided, I whispered his name, not as a plea, but as a promise. "Lucas Kane, I'm coming to bring you home." The world shattered into light and shadow, and the final war between the Alpha and the Barren began. The night was a wound. A living, breathing scar carved into the sky, half silver, half red, bleeding light over the battlefield that once was the Ironclaw Valley. The pack circled the ruins of the fortress, their fur matted with ash and blood, their eyes turned upward where light and shadow clashed like gods above them. Clara stood in the clearing, her white eyes burning, her silver hair whipping in the storm. The wolves of light surrounded her, a silent army pulsing with the heartbeat of the moon. Across from her stood Lucas, or what remained of him. His body was alive, but his spirit wore another's face. The shadow Alpha had made his skin a throne. His veins shimmered with dark fire, his claws blackened with corruption. The red glow of the cursed moon painted him in blood. He was beautiful still, devastatingly so, but there was no trace of the man who had once touched her so gently in the firelight. Only the monster born of their union. The wind howled through the trees. The world held its breath. "Clara Monroe," the shadow's voice boomed through Lucas's mouth, layered with echoing power. "You were meant to be a vessel, not a queen. You broke the seal, tore open the balance, and now you will finish what you started. Die, and let the world forget the name of the barren girl." Clara's hand trembled at her side, the silver light in her veins pulsing stronger with every beat. The old fear, the kind that used to make her hide, to shrink, to obey, flickered and died. She lifted her chin. "You can take his body," she said softly, "but you'll never take what made him human. And you'll never touch what's mine." The shadow laughed, a sound that cracked the air, sending tremors through the valley. "He is mine, child of light. You gave him to me." Clara's gaze didn't falter. "Then I'll take him back." The world erupted. Lucas lunged first, his movements a blur of red fire. The ground split beneath his feet, the earth screaming as shadow energy tore through it. Clara met him midair, her palms blazing silver white. When their powers collided, the explosion turned night into day. Wolves were thrown back by the shockwave. Trees splintered. The mountains groaned. They moved faster than thought, light and shadow dancing, clashing, merging. Each strike was a memory, each blow a heartbeat. When his claws tore through her arm, she didn't cry out. When her light seared his chest, he barely flinched. Pain was nothing now, only purpose remained. "Lucas," she shouted through the storm. "You can hear me. You're stronger than him." The shadow snarled, his voice vibrating with rage. "He is gone. The Alpha you loved is buried beneath 1,000 years of darkness." But in that instant she saw it, a flicker behind the crimson blaze of his eyes. A flash of gray. The smallest tremor of the man still fighting to break through. He was in there, trapped, waiting for her. She pressed forward, ignoring the blood running down her skin. "I know you can hear me," she said, voice breaking. "You told me once that the moon made monsters and lovers from the same breath. If you're still in there, prove her wrong." For a heartbeat, the shadow hesitated. Then it roared, throwing both hands forward. The darkness surged, swallowing everything. The wolves of light howled, their bodies dissolving into streams of silver as the wave of shadow hit Clara square in the chest, driving her to her knees. The cold sank deep. The darkness wrapped around her throat, her lungs, her heart, choking out every ounce of light. "This is how it ends," the shadow hissed in her mind. "This is what happens when the Barren pretend to create." Her body shook. The world dimmed. Her fingers dug into the earth. And in that suffocating void, something small and fierce inside her refused to die. Because she wasn't barren. She never had been. Her body had been sealed not to deny creation, but to protect it. To contain it until the world needed her to break. And now it had. Her voice rose through the darkness, not as a scream, but as a vow. "You call me barren," she whispered, "but I am the seed that never rotted. The light you couldn't kill. I am the womb of the moon, reborn in defiance." Her mark blazed open on her chest, flooding the battlefield with white fire. The shadow recoiled with a hiss, its tendrils snapping and smoking where they touched her light. Clara rose to her feet. The air trembled. Her hair floated weightlessly, her eyes now glowing with pure lunar radiance. Every heartbeat was a drum of thunder. Every breath was a prayer to something ancient. And as she raised her hands, the light from her palms spiraled into the air, forming the sigil of the bond, the same mark Lucas had once placed on her during the sealing ceremony. But this time, she spoke the words. "By the moon that made us, by the blood that binds us, by the soul I once gave to save you, I call you home, Lucas Kane." The words burned through the valley. The shadow screamed, writhing inside him, its form splitting, shattering. For the first time, Lucas's voice broke through, weak, desperate. "Clara!" She stumbled toward him, tears glowing like molten silver. "I'm here," she whispered. "Come back to me." The light and shadow tore through each other, struggling for dominion. The wolves howled in chorus, the forest trembling under the weight of their call. And then, just as the moon reached its peak, Clara pressed her hand to his heart and whispered the last vow. "Let there be no kings without their queens." A blinding light erupted. The shadow's scream echoed into nothing. The red in the sky faded to gold. When the storm cleared, the two of them lay in the center of a crater where the fortress once stood. Smoke curled in soft ribbons. The dawn broke over the horizon, pale and quiet. Lucas stirred first, his breath shaky, his eyes opening, gray again, clear as the first morning after rain. He looked at her, disbelief and wonder tangled in his expression. "Clara," he rasped, "you brought me back." She smiled faintly, though her face was pale, her light dimming. Told you I would." He reached for her hand, holding it against his chest. "The shadow." "Gone," she said softly. "But not without taking something from me." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer, not with words. Instead, she placed his hand over her abdomen. His breath caught. The warmth there was gentle, alive, a spark. Not an heir. Not a curse. A beginning. "The seal's broken," she said, tears spilling freely now. "Life came back with the light. Not just for us, but for everything." He stared at her, realization dawning, awe softening his face. "You weren't barren," he whispered. "You were waiting." "For the right world," she said. The sun crested the mountains, light bathing the valley in gold. The pack emerged from the ruins, one by one, their heads bowed, their bodies trembling not in fear, but reverence. They saw their Alpha and Luna standing hand in hand, surrounded by reborn forest, every tree budding with silver leaves, every breath filled with life. The prophecy had not ended in destruction. It had begun again, rewritten by the very woman who had been sold as worthless. As Lucas turned to face his pack, he knelt before her. "You were never mine to claim," he said softly. "You were sent to remind us what we are meant to protect." Clara smiled, lifting his chin until their eyes met. "Then protect it with me." He rose, the wolves bowing as one. The forest sang with the sound of rebirth. And as the dawn spilled across the highlands, the legend of the Barren girl who remade the world was born, not of prophecy, but of choice, love, and the kind of power only those once broken can ever truly wield. The moon watched from above, silent and radiant. And somewhere between heaven and earth, the spirit of the shadow whispered one last time, not in rage, but in reluctant awe. "So the Barren creates after all." Clara looked up, her hand resting protectively over her stomach, and smiled into the sunrise. "Not barren," she whispered, "just waiting for the right kind of light." The forest bowed. The wolves howled. And the age of the new Luna began.